Senator from South Carolina.
Thank you, Mr. President. The last 2 years, 2.5 years really, have been remarkable in a lot of ways. We've seen a lot of things across our country that are beginning to change the political landscape here in Washington. After President Obama's election, with a lot of fanfare and hope attached, we saw a lot of changes begin here in Washington. A lot of new spending with huge stimulus plans that clearly have not worked. We've seen a takeover of the health care system and the financial system. But what we saw across America is really what encouraged me. We saw millions of Americans uniting from all spectrums of politics, coming together for Tea Party rallies and town halls. They were concerned about our country. They were concerned about the spending and the borrowing and the debt. And in these groups were liberals and libertarians and independents and Republicans and Democrats. People with all political beliefs knew intuitively, instinctively in their guts that we couldn't keep spending more than we were bringing in here in Washington without bankrupting our country. I joined a lot of those groups around the country, and these were hardly radical people. They were common sense Americans from all walks of life who were just concerned about what we were doing here in Washington. They wanted us to get control of the spending and debt. We saw a lot of people here in Washington ignore what was going on. But across the country, many Republicans and even some Democrats were listening to what they were saying and made strong commitments that if they were elected to the House or the Senate, that they would come here and get control of the spending and the borrowing and the debt and try to return to some fiscal sanity, some concept of constitutional limited government that we had promised people when we take our oath of office that we would stand by. So we saw many new Republicans come to the House and to the Senate with a commitment to get control of the spending and debt, to save our country from this obvious bankruptcy that we're headed towards. The Tea Party was involved with that. It's hard for me to listen to a lot of the criticism of the Tea Party and their desire to balance the budget. There is no one Tea Party. What we're talking about are thousands of citizen groups across this country who are being vigilant about their government, which is what our founders asked them to be. They're not radical people. They're very common sense people, and they understand that what we're doing here in Washington is about to destroy the country. The term the Tea Party is being used here a lot to suggest it's a small radical group that's controlling some in the Republican Party. Over 70% of Americans agree with them that we should balance our budget, that we should cut spending and send a balanced budget amendment to the states to ratify. For every person who says they're part of a Tea Party, there are hundreds of Americans who feel the same way, who share those ideals of constitutional limited government and the concern and real fear that what we've been doing here in Washington has taken our country literally to the brink. It's deeply disturbing to hear the Vice President refer to Tea Parties as terrorists as he did today, holding a gun to the heads of Republicans and forcing us to make cuts. Clearly, Vice President Biden and many here are not listening to what Americans are saying and are trying to diminish what Americans are saying by suggesting this is part of one small group. The President showed right away this year, even after the November election, that he wasn't listening. He sent a budget here to Congress that increased the debt another $10 trillion by his measures, but really another $15 trillion if you look at it in any kind of objective way. And when the Republicans in the House demanded that they keep their commitment to cut $100 billion the first year, what did the President do? He said he would meet halfway at like $30 billion. He doesn't think we need to cut anything. He thinks we need to increase spending. And that's what he's been doing. This is the second crisis we've had this year. The first was this year's budget, where we came right to the edge of closing the government because the President and the Democrats do not want to cut anything. At least in the negotiations we see, if they're going to meet us halfway between 100, they start below zero if they end up at 30. They're not with us, and it's hard to negotiate with people who don't understand that we really do have a problem here. Washington, as Senator Rubio said, has a debt problem, but America has a jobs problem. But one of the things we need to understand is if we could stop growing the government, we could start growing the economy. More jobs would mean more tax revenue and less debt. But unfortunately, this president continues to make things much, much worse. He wants to continue to spend and borrow, but he won't take responsibility for his spending. He has failed to lead, and he loves to blame others. Sure, he inherited some problems. Every president does. George W. Bush before him inherited a recession. Reagan inherited double-digit inflation, double-digit interest rates. Yet they moved to solve the problem. The difference here is that Obama continues, after 2.5 years, to blame others, and his policies continue to make things worse. Let's talk about this debt ceiling for a minute, this debt crisis, and try to set the record straight. And clearly, President Obama has failed to lead in this whole process. We do need to remember, while he's trying to blame others for this debt ceiling problem, that it was a Democrat Congress and the President who signed into law the current debt limit that we have. This was not a Republican-created problem that we have. And for the last 4.5 years, Obama and the Democrats have controlled spending. So they set the debt limit, and they've spent the money to take us up to the debt limit. We've known for the last 6 months that we needed to deal with this problem. Yet the President submitted no plan at all. He just asked Congress to rubber stamp an increase of $2.4 trillion in our debt, to borrow another $2.4 trillion, and he said with no strings attached. He didn't want to cut anything when this whole debate started. No leadership. 6 months, no plan, just speeches, trying to shift the blame. And he likes to ignore the fact that the House passed a bill that would solve our problem. It was a bill called Cut, Cap, and Balance. It cuts spending right now. It controls spending out over the next 10 years. And it sends a balanced budget amendment to the Constitution to ratify. The response from the Democrats here in the Senate and President Obama was truly astounding. The President says he wants a balanced solution, but he does not want a balanced budget. He's actually called us extreme for wanting to balance the budget, and has said we can do our job without a constitutional requirement to balance the budget. We can do a job on America, but we're not doing the job that we were sent here to do, and we certainly have proved that we cannot control spending unless it's by law that requires us to do that. Even though this bill passed the House by a large number with some Democrat support, and it gave the President a $2.4 trillion increase in the debt limit, but only if we cut spending and controlled it and created some permanent accountability. We sent it to the Senate, and the leader of the Democrat Party would not even allow it on the floor for any debate because he saw the polls. He saw that already, with just in a couple of days, that 70% or nearly 70% of Americans supported the approach of cutting and controlling spending and creating some permanent accountability. So it was pushed aside so that we could make some more backroom deals with no transparency, no accountability, no leadership. I commend Speaker Boehner, Leader McConnell, the Republicans that have worked through this process. Dealing with people who won't put a plan on the table is very difficult. The Republicans passed Cut, Cap, and Balance. Then they followed up with another plan that wasn't so good, but it was a plan, and it didn't even get past the front door here in the Senate. For 6 months, no plan from the President, no plan from the Democrats. Now we've gotten a deal with a partner who does not want to cut spending. After a November election where we were sent here and the country pleaded with us to get control of spending, borrowing, and debt. You can look at this deal two ways. There are really two realities here. From any Washington standard, this is an historic sea change in the way we do business. Instead of what we were doing last year where we were talking about how much more we could spend and how much pork barrel of bacon we could take home, at least this year we're talking about the fact that we need to cut spending. So we can say the deal makes progress in that respect. But in the real world, a dollars and cents world, we have to realize that our country is on a path towards bankruptcy right now. We're projecting adding another $10 or $15 trillion to our debt. No one's going to lend us that amount of money. We don't have 10 years. This deal does not change that trajectory at all. We will still borrow $10 trillion or more in the next 10 years. We will still add $1 trillion a year to our debt. We cannot call this a debt reduction bill. We can really not even call it a spending reduction bill. For the next couple of years, it hardly cuts anything. And when we talk about cutting in Washington, we're not cutting spending from where it is today. We're reducing the rate of increase that is planned. So it's important that we tell the truth to the American people, that while this deal may be the best that we can do with the leadership in the White House or lack thereof, as well as the leadership or lack thereof here in the Senate, it may be the best political solution that we can get, but it does not solve America's problem. It certainly does not solve America's job problem, and it does nothing but add another $10 trillion to our debt if we're able to go that far. I will be voting against this bill because I do not believe we have 10 years to try to get it right. I think it's very likely over the next year or two or three that we're going to reach a very real debt limit when no one will lend us any more money. Today in America, we have to borrow $140 billion a month in order to pay our regular bills. And the people who are adding to that debt every month think it's extreme to balance your checkbook. It is time we get our house in order and force this Congress by the Constitution to balance its budget. We can't continue to spend more than we're bringing in and expect to reduce our debt. That's the inside Washington mentality. This deal is not a good deal for America. It may be the best deal that Washington can come up with the current leadership. But it puts our country at risk. But in a Washington where there is no leadership in the White House, there is no accountability, and there's someone sitting in the Oval Office who will not take responsibility for anything, this may be a deal that we have to accept for now. I intend to vote against it because it's important that we tell America the truth, that this puts our country at risk. It's time that we do what's best for America, not what makes the best deal here in Washington. I would encourage my colleagues to vote against this deal, even though I know they already have the votes. But I hope when this is passed that we will not think for 1 minute that we have solved a problem, that we will not try to convince Americans that now we have a few more years to spend and borrow without any repercussions. We need to immediately get back to the debate that was getting America involved the last election, which was balancing our budget and getting some fiscal sanity here in Washington. And while we're in desperate straits, I think, in our country right now, and we see our economy getting worse because of the policies of this administration, the good news is this. We can solve this problem with one more good election. And that's what I'm looking forward to, is taking my case to the American people in the case that they sent us up here to make to this Congress, that we need one more election to finish the job that they started in 2010. If they want us to get control of spending and borrowing and debt, we need a few more good people like the House freshmen who have stood their ground on this whole debate, and those that have come in here to the Senate and have led the way for a balanced budget. And it's that day I'm looking forward to, because on that day we will once again hopefully listen to America, get our house in order, balance our budget, and do what's best for our country. I thank you, Mr. President, and I yield back. Mr. President, I note the absence of a quorum.
Clerk, call the roll.
Mr. Akaka.